So today we're going to work on some UV maps and just a few UV mapping techniques for texturing. What are UVs? For every vertice of a model, there's a UV. And where the vertice, the little points that we see on the model, the vertex, these guys are coordinates in 3D space of where the object is and how it's actually made and displays its shape in 3D space. A UV coordinate is the coordinates of how the textures would lay out on the surface of a model. So you could think of it in this way. If I wanted to do a cereal box and start off with something basic like a cube, the first step I would do is right-click, assign a new material, and if it's a little bit shiny, then I'm going to say a blend. And so there's a blend attached to this. So if I actually change that, just gonna change things up a little bit so you can see it. So I've got this material attached to it, but it has no textures. And what I have open is my UV texture editor. And how I get to that is when you have your little boxes over to the right, you can rename them. These are formats for how I want my windows. That's a perspective, that's all four. So if I click on this one, it gives me all four windows, the perspective and 3 orthographic, top, front, and side. And if I right click on any of these, there's a bunch of different layouts we can use. So I'm going to go to the one called Perspective UV Texture Editor, or a Perspective UV Editor. What this does is whenever I have a model selected, it gives me the UVs. Now it's hard to tell here, but I'm going to put a texture on it so you can kind of see how this works, and then we're going to throw a real texture on it of how to fit things to it. So I select my model, go to the blend, and anytime this material gives me some shininess, depending on how I'm rendering it, it gives me reflectivity, but anytime I see a little checkered box next to any of these attributes inside this material, it means it's someplace that I could put something else inside of that attribute. I could put a texture inside a color, I could put a different type of node, and I can basically put something in all of these. But right now we're focused on the color. So I'm going to click on the little checkerboard to the right. This opens up my Create Render node, and I want to bring in a texture file, a file. And now I click on File in my attribute editor. There it is. And you'll notice if I zoom up, there it says image name. It's looking for the image in your source images folder. So I have to click here. And for right now, I'm going to pull in this one I have called Texture Grid 2. You may not see anything in here until you press 6, and then that pulls up the texture. See? So this is how the textures are laid out. It's hard to see the outline. There's an option to turn the texture off and on, or to dim it to make it a lot easier to see. That's better. And where G4, G5, H4, H5 is, this face right here, right-click face, that's the front. And we can see because they're matching. If I move that face, and you see it's connected to the others, this is where we start to change what texture is on it, but we also start to get distortion. And the distortion happens because G4, oh, that's this face here. But You see this is long and thin vertically, and the one in my UV texture editor is really distorted out to the right. That's why it's messing up here. The polygonal counterparts of the UVs have to match the UVs and vice versa. So what that basically means is that if my polygon here is a long, thin rectangle, then the UVs that represented over here should be a long, thin rectangle. And using this grid is a great option because it allows you to make sure that if you're doing your layout right, then these squares in the grid should actually look square and not rectangular. But what you'll notice, I'm going to turn on a few things. One, it's hard for me to see my texture border, my what's called my UV shell. So I'm going to click on this little guy right here, and that gives me the outline of the UV borders where the UVs are, like the edges are cut and these are separate. It's shaped like a T. But it's not really helping me out. So I could actually manipulate these, and just to bring this home, right now these are all one piece. If I right click and hold my mouse and go to UVs, in the UV texture editor you don't edit vertices, you edit UVs. So if I click on it, you'll see I clicked in this top corner selected. If I move that one, I cause distortion because this polygon face represents this one, but since this is square and this is this weird shape, that's what's giving me distortion. So what I need to do is break this up, but first I really should have a texture that I want to apply to it so we can see how this is working. So I'm going to go back in. I could right click, go to material attributes, and it takes me right to that material assigned to this model. Click on the color input now. You notice it's no longer a checker box, it's this little input. And I want to change that texture with something more fitting to cereal. And where did my texture go? Here we are. My Chucky Chimes. We hit open. And we have the texture, but we can see it's not laid out properly. So, textures project on the different angles of the faces. We choose that. We can either, in a simple model, we could just break this all up and then move the individuals, or we could take whole sections. So if I right click and go to UV, grab a UV, control right click to shell, grabs the entire UV shell. My. So anything in this box shows up on the front. That's kind of neat. But I want to have these independent. So for right now, I'm just going to do it the simple way. I'm going to grab these edges, and I want to break all these apart. I wouldn't do this on a super dense, complicated model this way, but for a simple one like this, it's just going to be really quick. And what I would do, I'd select them, and then I click on this guy right here, separate the UVs, and now you see all my lines are thick. And what that basically means is that if I grab this, move this out of this little space called the 0 to 1 space, and then I can go, oh, there's a face. Happens to be the front. And now right click, go to UVs, and I will scale it to fit the front. Kind of cool. Well, in a crazy psycho doll kind of way, but that works. Now I have to see which one of these faces is the side here. If I just select the face here, then it shows me. And you can see that's working pretty well. Excuse me. I'll show you how to even those off in a second. Select the back. It's that one. Move tool. Scale tool. And then the other side. Now, you may find that, like, let's say this one is like way up here, this one's down here, and you want to make them all nice and flat. So I'd right click, go to UVs, select all of them, and then up here, these little guys, we'll either move it to the line, all these to the line that's lowest that's selected, or the line that's highest that's selected. So, lowest. These, lowest. And I can move them all at the same time. Now, so far my Chucky-O's are looking good. Well, as good as they can be. Now, here's an interesting thing. This one is upside down. So what I have to do is select this one, and rather than freehand rotate, I have these that'll spin it 45 degrees until I have it at the right angle. See? And now that just leaves the top. The best way of thinking of UVs is if I were actually trying to unwrap a box into a flat version. That looks good. And that's basically what it is. As usual, press F to zoom in on the area you're working on. And just scale it so it looks good. And there we have it. Now, before I would have done that, I would have gone into Photoshop. And this is an important one. Your resolutions for your textures. You want to make sure that the resolutions for your textures are going to be a certain resolution. And I'll just pop that up right now so you can see. You want it as a factor of 4. So ideally, you want it square, and you want it 20. by 128 for lower res small objects, 256 by 256. Higher resolution, 1024 by 1024. Oops, you know what? I forgot one. 512 by 512. And definitely no higher than 2048 by 2048 for what we're doing. If you're working on stuff, a movie, you go higher than that, but in most cases you do not. You're going to stick to something like this. These guys are your sweet spot right there for what we're doing. So, these are your texture resolutions. My word actually goes a little bit nuts. There we are. And you want these squared. So that means going into Photoshop, bringing the image in, and when you check it and you see it, like if you're not making it yourself, and you see it that it's a weird resolution, you choose that you want to actually create a new document that is 1024 by 1024, 72 pixels per inch at largest, and this is only if you're gonna like render it and it's super close and it needs high res, because the higher the resolutions you're using, the slower it's going to be to render out, and the more resources it's going to use. If it's something that's small, you really could get away with a 512 by 512, so you know where your camera is going to be at. And another good idea is to make the background the same color, primary color, as whatever your image is that you're using. And that's just a quick intro to basic UV mapping and seeing what it looks like.